as Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy is now seeking international help to prevent a global food crisis because of this war. Zelenskyy wants to end a Russian blockade of Ukraine's ports so that wheat exports can get out. He says, quote, immediate measures must be taken. And meanwhile, a defiant Russian President Vladimir Putin is trying to justify his invasion of Ukraine to his own people and the people of the world. Putin spoke today at a massive military parade through Moscow's Red Square, marking the anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945, a really important day in Russian history, since they did most of the work. He declared that his invasion of Ukraine was, quote, a preemptive response to aggression and, quote, the correct decision. For more on this, let's bring in foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge. He's in Kyiv, Ukraine. And Tom, great to have you with us. I know you're starting out with us at ABC News, although a veteran foreign correspondent. We're really glad and lucky to have you. So thanks for being with us. But let me ask you first, Putin's in a bad spot, right? His army failed around Kyiv. They're kind of plodding a little bit forward in the east. So he's now on Victory Day in Russia trying to justify it. How are people responding, do you think, to his speech in Red Square?
Terry, great to talk to you. I saw all your work out here. You did some great reporting. Listen, I mean, I don't think there were major surprises in terms of the rhetoric, the narratives that Vladimir Putin pushed. I mean, we've heard them from him before. The frankly false narrative that Russia has launched this war to denazify Ukraine. We know that the far right here has got very few votes in elections. That's simply false, that narrative. And also, we sort of expectedly saw from Vladimir Putin him trying to link the victory in World War II, the sacrifices of the Soviets, 27 million people approximately killed in the Soviet Union during World War II. They took the heaviest losses, trying to link that to today's war. President Zelenskyy here in Ukraine simply saying that's a betrayal.
And you'd understand why he wants to link the sacrifices that Russia made in World War II to what's happening today, because his army's had its hat handed to him up north of Kyiv, and the Russian people all of a sudden live in a different country. They've been sanctioned out of the modern economy. He continues, Putin does, to put the blame on Ukraine, as you were just talking about, and on the West. Just play it for people who hear him. What is his rationale? How does he come up with that?
Well, look, I've heard this rationale for 8 years, right? I mean, I was out in the Donbass in the east of Ukraine back then, back in 2014. Really, frankly, Russia created the war in the east of Ukraine. It used local proxies, it armed them, it supplied them with weapons, it financed them, it created the administration there. When I was on the Russian side, I saw people really who came across as Russian agents at times. So, Russia's hand in eastern Ukraine was pretty obvious. They've also used that narrative that, somehow they've been provoked into this. Somehow this was NATO encroaching on their territory. And I think really the simple response to that, and Ukraine and the West will put this forward with some force, is that it's the Ukrainian people, right? This is a democratic nation. Ukrainian elections in the eyes of the United Nations are free and fair. They hold their elections, they elect their politicians, and the politicians have chosen to sort of move towards the West, move towards the European Union, not to join NATO. There was talk of that back in 2014. Of course, we know that NATO has been training Ukrainian troops, and that has made a massive difference on the battlefield.
Clearly, and they fight in more of a Western way, with that kind of jointness of action and communications and all of that. But I want to ask you about something that people were talking about. Analysts going into Putin's speech thought that he might call a massive national conscription for troops in Russia, because, let's face it, he really pushed all his chips in the center of the table here, and the army is struggling. His forces are struggling. Were you surprised that for all the rhetoric on this Victory Day speech, he really didn't nationalize this war? He didn't make it a national commitment calling for a new conscription to fight it?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, because Vladimir Putin needs to kind of keep the Russian people on board. I mean, it's difficult to judge public opinion in Russia right now. We know that the media isn't free there. We know that opinion polls there you have to take with a pinch of salt. But I think, broadly speaking, he has a lot of popular support in Russia. But if he wants to ramp up this war, if he wants to bring in more troops, we know that Russia has suffered considerable losses, particularly in the areas around Kiev where they withdrew from. So Russia, you know, its military is definitely stretched to some extent, and therefore, yes, it was possible that he was going to have to mobilize this, but no, because it's a massive risk. He knows that if he mobilizes, if he declares war, remember, Russia has still not called this a war. The Kremlin says this is a special military operation. If he does that, mobilizes more troops in, then he really has to win, in inverted commas, because if he doesn't, you know, the consequences for him could be very bad.
Trying to hang on to whatever public support he has, which has gone up. It did go up at the beginning of the war, rallying around Mother Russia and around Vladimir Putin. Tom Soufi-Borge, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for that.